Skybet Aka Freeze. If an absolute screamer or a howler from their keeper has put you in front, don't let a lively winger on a mazy run spoil your bet. Just freeze a winning score and win a leg of your Aka early with Skybet Aka Freeze. Skybet, for the fans. Minimum 5 selections. Pre-match football only. Full-time result market only. Max stake £20. Max 3 freezes per week. Eligibility restrictions and further T&Cs apply. 18+. Gambleaware.org.
When you want to get off the darkest ground, but gravity pulls you straight down. Earth from a bird's eye view. You should grow feathers and see this too. When you want to get off the darkest ground, but gravity pulls you straight down. When you want to get off the darkest ground, but gravity pulls you straight down. Clear sky. When you want to get off the darkest ground, but gravity pulls you straight down. Earth from a bird's eye view. You should grow feathers and see this too. When you want to get off the darkest ground, but gravity pulls you straight down.
Good evening and welcome everybody. This is Obi-Wan Pez for Simplex Pachinko. We are here tonight doing some more work with Peter Liljedahl's Building Thinking Classrooms in Mathematics. We're on chapter 12 of 15. What do we choose to evaluate in a thinking classroom? So, if anybody does not know my typical schedule, I'm usually here on Mondays and Wednesdays doing mathy type stuff. Mondays are going to be reserved for math education type things, so like teaching and talking about mathematical psychology, mathematical philosophy, or educational, there we go, educational psychology, educational philosophy, all that good stuff. We will also look into different books. I'm going to have to pull a few that I'm going to want to get. I know Bell Hooks' Teaching to Transgress is one of the next few that I would want to get into, as well as probably John Dewey and Martin and Gardner. Martin Gardner? Yeah. We have a couple of educational philosophy books that are back there about all sorts of cool stuff. So they are, granted, probably more than 20 years old, but nonetheless, at that point, they are pretty cool books and have some interesting ideas, regardless of when specifically they were released. So we'll discuss some about that. Wednesdays are typically a calculation night, so we do all sorts of stuff. If anybody is interested in asking math questions, anybody wants to know why a certain thing works, or if they need their skills improved within mathematics, I'm very happy to take whatever questions you might have. I will also accept those questions any night, and we'll take a little break and go on a diversion and get this other stuff. Get anybody's questions asked, because quite frankly, that's why we're here, right? So any of us in the math Twitch community pretty much always want to help students first and foremost. Sorry, there was a discrepancy on something. Anyway. We have base building on Sunday nights, so typically we're playing some sort of base building game, survival, what have you. We have been doing Satisfactory. We also completed the Astroneer harvest event in about 15 minutes last night. And moved on to Elite Dangerous after a little bit so that we could play some other base building. Not exactly in the same way, but there's a war on, so like we do tend to play Elite a lot more when there's a war on. Tuesday nights we have been playing Nine Souls. It's reserved for basically any games that are in my queue that I just want to get rid of. And then Fridays are for the long game. And we have been playing Against the Storm, which has indeed been a long game. And then we'll have multiple options for us when that's over. So it shouldn't be too much longer until we finish the main quest on that one. We'll see how things go. And of course, this month, October, we're trying to do more like spooky, scary games. So we'll see how that goes. What else I have in my queue? We do have a bunch on Epic still, so we can get through those. Okay, so typically the way things work on... I'm in the wrong place. There. Typically the way things work on Building Thinking Classrooms nights is that I've been reading from Peter Liljedahl's Building Thinking Classrooms. We discuss why some of the things exist the way that he states them in the book. We discuss a little bit about his research that he's been doing. This concluded, at least, the data that he took for the book concluded around 2019. He had been working for about 15 years with 400 educators between the US and Canada. He is based himself at Simon Fraser University in British Columbia, and he has been doing the good work of trying to explain what his research has shown over many of the past several years. So I first met Peter in a well, okay, the only time I've actually met him is in an informal setting, in that I was way in the back listening to his talk and he was way in the front giving the talk. So I have not actually spoken with him person to person. Unlike Sunil Singh, that was kind of cool. Anyway. So the way things are going to work is we're going to discuss what is actually printed in the chapter, discuss his research, and then discuss my personal experience with using building thinking classrooms in a community college setting, which technically is not exactly what he went for here. He says that this is building thinking classrooms in mathematics, grades K through 12. Honestly, most of these practices work just fine when you do them properly with community college students, just the same as they would for probably anybody else. Mostly because most of the ideas that are borne out in his research are pretty ubiquitous regardless of age range.
Hello there.
Shame. Shame. Shame.
I hear you. I'm coming. All right. Sorry about that, everybody. Good evening and welcome. My name's Obi-Wan Pez. This is N Simplex Pachenko. Thank you so much. I heard you. Yeah, no, somebody called
Hello
me
there.
over. Somebody called me over there, so, you know. When you get called into the next room, you better go. Okay. So more or less to start over. I don't think any of you were here. Tonight is Building Thinking Classrooms. With Peter Liljedahl, we're doing Chapter 12, which is all about what we choose to evaluate in a thinking classroom. More or less, the way things go is that I read sections out of the book. We discuss his research that's here and how it connects with some of the other research that might be out there. And then we will discuss my personal experiences with attempting to use building thinking classrooms in the community college level. I did do it for about a year, is like how much time I was kind of playing with stuff. For 2 semesters, I did like kind of a light version of it where I was just mostly working on getting all of the activities done and trying to get the in-class practices set and ready. And then fall of 2023 was when I did an entire semester of the whole Building Thinking Classrooms style. Inspired you to talk about this tomorrow? Nice. And and Zach, I'll get to you about when we should start doing some planning stuff. If we want to do it like after the end of it, chapter 15 is going to be in 4 weeks, so there's an option. Do something in 5 weeks, or after that anyway. It would make more sense to have the, let's try to build everything and then try to do the lessons after the compilation lesson. Righto. Catch you on Discord. Speaking of which. Everybody out there, this is Penn Center. He is a department chair out in British Columbia. And Penn, if I'm wrong about any of this, definitely correct me. And does all sorts of mathy type stuff, as well as Legend of Zelda. Come on now, there we go. And his channel is the home of The Elements. He's also a chair streamer. Thanks, Bet. That should be his Discord, where most of us mathy-type people congregate at various points. Individual people may have their own Discord servers. I don't. So, when I do stuff, I'm usually there. Alright. Don't do that. Okay. Trying to make things work correctly. Always a challenge. Cool. So we'll start from there. Is it the department chair? Did I borrow it from the office? Yeah, our department definitely did not opt for gaming chairs. I can tell you that much. They were like those office chairs that have lawn chair material, and then you know, it's nice because it's like waterproof and stuff. Cleans real easily. But then it's also basically stretched plastic that sort of has a little bit of give to it, so eh. Yeah, or the bear, yep. Reese. How's he doing these days? Mine is blue, yes. What is it? Emerge. I believe I got it at Office Max. Staples? He's scared of the wind. Yeah, that happens. Okay. So, oh, and how rude of me. Anybody who wasn't here directly from Zach's, there you are. Twitch.tv/e to the 2i pi. Last working on the quiz show. Woohoo! Okay. So, to quote Peter Liljedahl, in Chapter 8, we looked at the role that fostering autonomy can play in helping mobilize knowledge around the room. So we talked about how when you have a room full of students, the ideal that his research showed was if you have a number of whiteboards that are around the room, something like this, I don't really know. Basically, you should be somewhere in the middle and not only in one place. Keep, you know, wandering around and such. And your role as an educator is not to teach the actual subject, which some people really rail against, especially and including the students, because they don't want to do the thinking. They want you to do that for them. I speak in generalizations, but honestly, there were quite a few students who definitely said, when are we just going to get back to you teaching us? So the idea here is that you are more or less in the central location of the room, meandering around and listening to various conversations, and when students ask you questions, typically you are not answering them, unless, oh, right, we need to get our previous Chapter 11 class notes. Yes, that. We need to get our crop down to that. enter. And then blow it up. Ooh. 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 Right, so we had discussed the institutional norms just basically have to be broken in every possible way, shape, and form. We designed, or we were talking about, needing to design non-curricular thinking tasks at the very beginning of class, such as, here's a diagram, solve for a very specific value. So, in that tiny thing that you cannot possibly see, it is a square of unknown side length, and there is a point on the inside to which 3 of the corners have distances 3, 4, and 5. And the idea is that you need to find the side length of the square. That is all the information that you were given. And from this, students will be able to work together, you start using more mathematical language, start discussing mathematical concepts without it necessarily being curricular in nature. Second, form visibly random groups of 3. So my choice was to get decks of cards and start eliminating or taking out the 3 aces, the 3 twos, the 3 threes, etc., up to how many students I had. Mod 3 plus 1. That's not the answer. Nope, sorry. Floor divided by 3 answer. No. Oh, man. Sorry. Ceiling. Student divided by 3. Wow. I should just cut that. Too bad DaVinci Resolve isn't working. Hey. Right. We take groups of 3 cards. We keep laying them out. And then once you get the number of students or above the number of students that you're planning on having, you take all those, shuffle them up, and then spread them out and say, pick a card, any card. We discussed reasons as to why that's important. You can go back and watch video number 2. I just released at 9 p.m. tonight on N-Simplex Pachinko our Building Thinking Classrooms Chapter 3. So where do students work? So Chapter 2, how do we form collaborative groups, has been out for a week, give or take. So anyway, we form visibly random groups of 3. We have students work standing where able at vertical non-permanent surfaces. We limit the amount of furniture that's in the classroom, mostly having them stand or what have you as able around the edge of the room, as in that diagram there. You are to only answer keep thinking questions. So if a student asks you, are we doing this right? You turn it around on them and say, I don't know, what do you think? Or show me where you're at. Or explain this. Or various other stuff. Try to get the other students to also get working on this as well. One of the most awesome, hilarious things that I love doing is if you notice that a student has been typically holding a particular role, i.e. they've been the ones writing everything, you take the marker from them, you do something on the board, and then when you cap it, you hand it back to somebody else. Intentionally. And you keep doing it every time, they'll eventually get the hint. Oh, we all need to collaborate on this. It was a little tough in 2022, where we were all dealing with COVID, but as we were, starting to have fewer and fewer issues with it, or as we were limiting or getting rid of our social distancing and all that. And again, this is Maryland, so there's a lot of people. We tried to keep our hygiene habits up, so we had a lot of alcohol-based wipes. Clean off the marker, clean off the cards as you're handing them back, that sort of thing. Defront the classroom. So try to make sure that there is no front of the classroom, and this is why being in the middle, you're able to just keep moving all the time. Answer only the keep thinking questions, so anytime that a stop thinking question is asked, you can either redirect it, as I said, or just kind of smile and walk away. So the idea is that you are telling them through nonverbal cues that you are not going to answer non-thinking questions. It is a little bit of a harsh sort of way to do it, but I like it. It's kind of funny. Start your days by giving tasks with students clustered around you, verbally only, standing as able, and within the first 5 minutes of addressing the class as a whole. The second you say, all right, let's get everything together, the timer has started. Reframe homework as check your understanding exercises, because homework is telling students where and when to do things. Check your understanding exercises are, on the other hand, thanks, Famished. Check your understanding exercises are telling students that these things are for them, because it is to check their understanding, and when it's to be done is up to them. So it's going to be at their leisure, at their convenience, not yours. And it is, again, for them, not for you. It is also not for a grade. Dost thou in hoist? Practice 8 is fostering student autonomy by redirecting. So instead of giving students the information that they request, what you can do is route them to somewhere that has the information. So point somewhere around the room and say, oh, look, I noticed that that group over there has something that might be interesting. Why don't you go talk with them? Again, they know that you have all the information that they need, probably. And realistically, if you just give it to them, they will be perfectly happy to ask you again. If, on the other hand, you get them to go to a different group and start talking with them instead, it can be much more valuable, both as building social connections between all of the students, and also being able to get them to start looking for that information themselves, rather than going to you to get you to redirect them. Let's see. Practice 9 is use hints and extensions to make sure that you stave off frustration and boredom, respectively. So, using hints also helps build their perseverance, because they're going to be like, okay, well, we can probably try something like this next time that we get stuck. And also extensions to stave off boredom, and then start engaging their patience. So students are going to see your usage of extensions and say, we could ask a similar question next time that we are finished and no one else is. We can start saying, hey, let's look for an application instead of asking for an application. That sort of thing. Practice 10 is to consolidate the lesson. We're going to consolidate from the bottom, or as I said, sweeping from the bottom, where basically we're going to end the lesson by coming together as a group and discussing what the practice is for getting the job done, whatever that might be. In the case of like quadratic equations, you want to start with a very easy example and then start working your way up. And there are several different ways to do it. We had discussed 3 specific practices, one of which is, usually generally speaking, my favorite. You're going to, circle, box out, get students to retain some piece of information that you want their group to retain, and you're going to string together all of these different things around the room. Also, you don't want to do it linearly, or in this case, circularly going around the room, but rather you want to say, okay, let's look at number 1 over here. This is the easy one. Can anyone else who is not in this group explain to me what is going on? And by doing that, it engages the rest of the class to look at the board. They have to know what's going on, and it makes them a little curious as to what's going on, especially if that was not a method that they used. And then number 2 is going to be somewhere over here instead. And then number 3 is going to be over here. And number 4 is going to be over here. And number 5 is going to be over here. And then 6, 7, 8. So by doing this gallery walk in sort of a pseudo-random fashion, yes. By doing this walk in a pseudo-random fashion, you end up building out more connections around the room. The students get lost in terms of whose board was whose. If their group is standing in front of their board, it's really easy to look at them and be like, oh, this is your board. I ought to be extra critical of this, or something like that. You're changing often enough that they're not going to remember exactly who was at each board. And chapter 11 was about how students take notes. We had discussed that the optimal solution was that students should have 1/8 of a sheet of paper, roughly speaking, in order to take notes for that day. And it should be notes that they are keeping for themselves. So what are you going to forget in 3 weeks? Or in other words, you need to take notes for your future forgetful self. Once you have done that, what is going on there? Right. So number 11, chapter 11 there, was notes to your future forgetful self. Again, about 1/8 of a page. It doesn't have to be a specific amount. We're just trying to constrain students to say, like, what's important and what are you going to need to remember. If you say, like, are you going to forget the quadratic formula? And somebody's like, no, it was drilled into my head by my high school teacher, and sings it for you, you can be like, all right, so you should not write down the quadratic formula anywhere on this page. Do not write the quadratic formula. You don't need it here. You only need to write the notes for the things you're going to forget, or you think you're going to forget. And that also helps where you forgot where you put your notes. That's also another problem. I mean, pretty much all of mine are in some spiral-bound notebook. Where the notebook is, yes, also a very good question. But most of them are somewhat nearby. Okay. So now that we're done with our warm-up. Right? What do we choose to evaluate in thinking classroom? Ugh. So, in this chapter, we'll learn about how we, as educators, can use evaluation to further develop and refine these and other student competencies, i.e., mobilizing knowledge, which in turn helps a thinking classroom to function better. So, foster autonomy to help mobilize knowledge to help the classroom think better. Okay, so we foster autonomy. Ugh. Which leads to mobilization of knowledge. Which in turn leads to better thinking. Dr. Ill, good evening and welcome. Yeah, definitely. We also have our first 3 of this series up on YouTube. youtube.com/@nsimplexpachenko6542. If you search nsimplexpachenko, or if you search building thinking classrooms, in theory I should be there. Peter Liljedahl also does not have a YouTube presence of his own. However, he does have a number of appearances on various educational channels. So he himself has been known to be around. I had to pause there for a second because I was wondering if you might have been Dr. Liljedahl. You are not. That's fine. Could have been awkward. Would have been hilarious. Okay, so then we need to... Oops. Don't do that. Build and evaluate. This and other competencies. Okay, so Peter often in his workshops will ask the following question. What competencies are valuable for students to be successful at the next task? The next lesson. The rest of the course. Semicolon. Mathematics as a whole. Or to be successful in a thinking classroom.
Skybet Acker freeze. If an absolute screamer from their keeper has put you in front,
Well, if mathematics is a hole in the ground,
just freeze
do you know the difference between
Acker early with Skybet Acker freeze.
your rear end and mathematics? Anyway, it's important, right? So, what is going to... You're picturing Lewis Gary, yeah. So, what competencies are valuable for students to be successful at the next task, or the next lesson, or the rest of the course, or mathematics, or to be successful in a thinking classroom? So, he has asked all of these at various points. And he said, okay, so pick a couple of important ones that you have. And then come up with, like, your best three, basically. And he said he's been doing this, or at the time of publishing, at the time of writing, he'd done this over 50 different professional development settings and asking the same exact question with, a tag on the end, depending on, the vibe in the room, basically. Are we doing a building thinking classrooms thing, or are we doing, like, just math teachers in general? He knows his audience. And doing this question with teachers at vertical non-permanent surfaces in randomized groups of 3. Teachers will usually come up with 10 to 20 competencies per group, with naturally a lot of overlap. Right? The most common ones, or rather, he says that they will range often from curiosity and critical thinking and patience. However, what he found right, so is that when you get all of the groups around the room to choose their top 3 and then bring them all to the center, and then and then make a unionized set of all possible answers that were, or all possible top 3s that were given in the room, he said invariably, no matter what happens, regardless of geography, grade levels, or professional development setting, or grade levels, right, or the professional development setting, the same 3 competencies appear every single time. So every single time, the same 3 competencies make the compiled unionized set of top 3s, and they are perseverance, Tiny Toxic Tofu! Thank you so much for the follow. Good evening and welcome. Willingness to take risks. How are you this evening? And the ability to collaborate. So again, every single time that they had all of these groups of teachers come up with 10 to 20 competencies that they want for their students, and then they all were told, get your group to come up with a top 3, and then they got those top 3s all the way around the room in 8 groups or whatever to come together and say, okay, what are your top 3s? Everybody, let's go down that list. Every single time, somebody has put up perseverance, somebody has put in willingness to take risks, and somebody has put in ability to collaborate. Every single time. Even when I ask the question without situating it in thinking classroom settings, so ask random teachers, random math teachers, right? Hundreds of teachers, maybe including you, have identified these as the competencies most valuable to student success in not only thinking classrooms, but just mathematics in general. It's not to say that these are the only 3 that end up on the master list naturally. There's going to be, 24 per professional development setting if you've got 8 groups. Curiosity, autonomy, self-respect, no. True, but no. Self-responsibility, grit, positive views, self-efficacy, etc. will also make appearances, but not always with the same consistency. Perseverance, willingness to take risks, and ability to collaborate are the 3 that always show up no matter what. My next question to teachers and you is always the same. Is it our job as teachers to wait for students to come to us with these competencies in place, or is it our job to help develop these competencies within the students that we have in front of us? Okay, naturally, right? The answer is always the same. It is our job to develop these competencies, or to at least help develop these competencies in whatever way we possibly can. And in many jurisdictions around the world, they have these competencies, sometimes called processes, as explicit outcomes of their curricula. I know in the United States, a lot of these were starting to make it into the what might be termed soft objectives, where you are not going to have like a super easy method of evaluation, unlike, for instance, a like hard objective, like can you do this type of problem? Super easy to get some sort of test for that student to do to say, are you competent in this particular skill? The problem, of course, and we've discussed this before, is that when students know that what they need to do is to perform a task, they don't really mind all that much if they need to cheat to do it. So we discussed this way early on in some of the earlier sections. Students, generally speaking, are there for like two main reasons. One is to get a skill, and the other is to get a grade. There was also a third one to develop social consciousness. So, these particular things may not be aligned with our objectives as educators, and so we need to start thinking deeper about how we make that work. Again, these three things might show up in soft objectives, but like, how do you evaluate these three things? Well, it's going to be rather interesting. So, the problem, saith Peter Liljedahl, is whether or not we should develop these competencies is not the question we should concern ourselves with. The answer is clear. You are probably already doing this through problem-based learning, collaborative groups, or mathematical discussion. If you've been implementing the thinking practices you read as you read along, you have definitely already started doing these competencies and developing these competencies among your students. So the perseverance we were talking about, like working with student autonomy and also using hints and extensions to help the students figure stuff out and let them take responsibility for their groups. Willingness to take risks, again, when you're working in randomized groups of 3 at vertical non-permanent surfaces, you're willing much more to take a risk than you will if it is a permanent surface like a marker on paper. And the ability to collaborate, you're working in randomized groups of 3, you're going to pretty much get assigned to a group with pretty much every person in the entire room at some point during the semester. It's pretty much inevitable. There might be one that you never got to be in a group with, but it's vanishingly unlikely as the semester continues. And you never know, toward the end of the semester, if somebody realizes that I've never been in a group with this person, you might just say, hey, tomorrow, why don't you two join together, just for fun? Just so you get the opportunity. So, the question we should be concerning ourselves with is, how are we going to evaluate them? It seems like a daunting task. It seems almost impossible because this is not something that you could just make a problem for. This is going to be something that you're going to have to work at over the course of the semester, over the course of your career, in order to better evaluate these things, which are the ones that we actually want students to get. We want students to have greater perseverance in order to just work at problems and make, incremental gains, even if it's not something that's obvious, even if it's not something that takes them the same amount of time as everybody else in their group or the next two groups over. We want students to be willing to take risks and be the person who's going to come up with an idea for, today. And we want them to be able to collaborate with other people, because collaboration is going to be the basis for not just math class, not just coming up with these individual ideas, but like literally all of society. That's the entire point. We came together as a society because we needed to collaborate as a group of people. Shakes fist at individualism. Okay, so depending on the mandates of your curriculum that you work under, you may neither be required to nor have the desire to evaluate such competencies. But this misses the point. If these competencies are valuable, then we need to evaluate them. So the short, pithy little saying that he uses for this one, which I love, is we need to start evaluating what we value. Okay, ads are about to start. We'll be back in 3 minutes, and then we'll discuss more about the problem and then finding a solution to it. So, 3 minutes, like I said, be right back. Thanks so much for coming on in.
Travel far from where you are. Fly from Leeds Bradford Airport with KLM Royal Dutch Airlines. If distance were no object, what would you do?
I'd be in Rome, submerged in flour, learning to make real pizza from a nonna who means business.
Rio for us. We'll take a samba class and sambron down to Pedro de Sal.
Travel far from where you are. Fly from Leeds Bradford Airport via Amsterdam with KLM Royal Dutch Airlines. Visit klm.co.uk.
Righto. Yep, so my son was at school today, so I didn't get to actually pick up any of the stuff that's here. It's fine. So, the basic warm-up that we do for some of the Tai Chi stuff is just basically rocking back and forth and allowing our arms to kind of swing just as they're going to naturally swing. And basically you're treating your entire body like a swing. If you're on a swing set, you need to add more power on the downswing in order to make it go higher. We don't want to actually add too much momentum, because then you get this whole like flop down thing, just like when you were trying to go over the top of the swing when you were younger. I know you did it. I've definitely gone slack multiple times. A few times it actually hurt. So this is to get all of the like synovial fluid in your joints and better blood flow to your muscles and all sorts of cool stuff like that. It also increases the amount of force on your arms, because you're doing a little bit of like centripetal force there, so it's pulling some of the blood more toward your fingers. You can actually feel it. It's a little weird. I first noticed this when I hit about 25 and decided to pitch a fastball in the Museum of Science. They had this nice little like setup for, test your baseball pitching skills. And I threw one really hard and like hurt something in here and felt all the blood rush to my fingers. I was like, that's not nice. All right, if we stand with feet roughly parallel and we do the same sort of thing, only this time we're going to just kind of turn side to side. And instead of letting your arms flop completely, what you do is you kind of put a little bounce in your step and let them come up toward your shoulder. And that will cause the front one to swing a little bit harder and the back one to catch some momentum for the front swing. And then you can be much more subtle about it as you get better at it. Let's see, what else do we do? There's a couple more. I forget them. Let's see. We also do bear. So we put our feet, again, roughly parallel to each other. Get the arms kind of out a little bit, like a bear. And then we're going to turn to one side and then use the front, what is now the front foot, to push back. And you sink back onto this back leg. You don't want your rear end to be really much further than your calf. And then we turn gently, and now we push off of this leg onto the other one. And then we turn back. And you should feel that there's a little bit of a crease right in your groin muscle. And you should feel that you're kind of crunching this down, so that when you release that, this is like you're building up spring energy in these muscles here. Tops of your quads, groin muscle, and like the very, very tops of your abs. So when we twist this way, you feel a little bit in this area of muscle. My instructor told me what it was, and now I don't remember what it is. There is a particular bundle of muscles right here that is especially used in like Chinese martial arts. And it's all this internal like development of springy action. So again, here can push off gently, and we end up back on this one, and most of the weight here is being held by the gluteus maximus until you turn in this way, and then it all centralizes about here again. And then again, push back, draw across, push back. And so by doing this, we're building up gluteus maximus, these groups of muscles here, and we're building this habit of trying to make the make these muscles work in concert. Okay. So for our form, typically we're doing 8 specific moves, which correspond to the 4 cardinal directions. So those that you do when you are in control, and those that respond, or those that represent the 4 winds, I believe, which are those which you do when you are not in control of the situation. So typically when you are in control of the situation, we do a... Now this is not actually the move itself, but this is prepping. So we do this ball of energy that we bring across our body. I am pushing down and out with both of my feet. Rear leg should only be about a 45-degree angle, not way out to the side like I had it. Right, and then we're going to step and do a ward off right. This is usually going to connect with somebody else's arm right about here, and you want that to more or less remain in the same place. So we're going to do, this is ward off. We're going to do a roll back, so we bring it just slightly to our right, and the left arm comes about halfway down or pretty close to the elbow. And then while you're holding this structure out here, this is going to come back to the center line. Our hand comes back and then reinforces into a press. We lean forward onto our front leg. And then here we're going to do basically an escape move, where if somebody's like coming at either your throat or your lapel, you do the press and then you flick your hands out, and it connects with theirs, pushes them off, so that if they're trying to attack you, they're not going to connect anymore. So ward off, roll back, press, and then we lean back and we push. The push, again, rather than using our arms like this, we basically lock our arms into position and then just use our body weight to do most of the work. It does significantly a lot of the work. So we're leaning on the front leg at this point. The 4 wins end up being a pluck, where if somebody is attacking you, you're going to step back and then basically either parry or grab their arm and let it go past you. Then you're going to reprimand them for daring to attack you by doing what's called a split. That can either be a slap or a ridge hand or something similar. There's all sorts of stuff, including, and we do this later, the gooseneck, where you use the ends of your radius and ulna to hit your target. So you could do that as well. Although I wouldn't necessarily stop here because that's going to whip your hand. But at any rate, most of the time you're doing a slap or you're doing a ridge hand for this. Once you've done said movement, we pretend that they have grabbed your wrist, so you clear it by taking your hand around your arm and then pulling back. So whatever they were holding on to you with is now probably over here somewhere. You can then grab hair, collar, back of the neck, something like that. Elbow. Again, reprimand for attacking you. And then we do the shoulder strike. For that, we step back, we lean back, and then we step forward. And this will strike into your target. Usually we aim for the solar plexus with, you know, a lot of your strong stuff. This would end up being like way down here. And then the hand is going to be allowed to go where it will. So typically when you stop your motion here, your hand's going to keep going. And that can do a lot of damage. If we go to here, then oftentimes we go directly into ward off right, and then we can keep moving across the room. So we do a roll back and a press. This is going to be difficult. And then push. And then from here, pluck, split, elbow, shoulder. Okay. Then from here, if we were just finishing up our move, so do one of those. There's a couple of things that we can do. My instructor was trying to teach me the way to turn around properly, and I'm going to try to do it here. It's been 3 days, so, you know, all of it's jumbled up in there somewhere. But basically, the way that we're going to do this is normally we go from press, we go from push, and we say from here. What we're going to do is turn our front legs, toes, inward, and our it's very awkward, and our back leg is still going to be facing at like the 45-degree angle from straight. So we're going to come across like this. We're now going to bring all of this down to the hip. All of my weight more or less is on my back foot again, and then we're going to well, curses. It's like we start by moving the start by moving the ball of our foot and come out like this with the gooseneck, and then we move our foot across and come up with an open hand. And now we're more or less, nope, I don't want to be there. And now we're more or less in the correct position. We're still leaning back quite a bit. We need to lean forward, turn the hand back the other way, and also turn on the heel of our back leg, or what's now the back leg. And now we're facing the correct direction to do a ward off left. Which is going to be terribly awkward because I don't know anything from the left-hand side. But basically do one of these. We go into press, push, right? And then we do pluck, split, clear, elbow, and then shoulder. Or we just do the 4 cardinal directions. So we would go from right, ward off, press, roll back, press, push, and then go straight back into ward off again this way. Alright, normally, again, you want to keep both your shoulders loose and up, because essentially what we're doing is we're keeping the like ballroom dancing frame of your arms is also adding to the Tai Chi usage here. You're engaging all of your back muscles, not just if you're doing one like this and keeping your other arm to the side. That's a lot of work for this side and not a lot of work for this side. So very much like we were doing with Eskrima when we were going out like this, we were both using the weapon to go forward and also counteracting or counterweighting with our hand going the other direction. So here we're doing the same. We come with a ward off, and now we're going to be holding both of our shoulders up in order to help move all that stuff. Alright, anyway. Ballroom dancing frame, yep. Will Obi's feet successfully navigate the pain from children's toys? Tune in to find out. Excellent. I mean, the good news is that they're like, these are Brio, so they're like solidly built and not a whole lot of like small bits to stab you in the feet. Heck yes, Brio. That's some like, I was gonna say 80s toys, but honestly, my dad might have had those. Not that one, but that's a question. Brio Company, wooden toys founded in Sweden in 1884. Okay. Products. Wooden trains since 1958. So yes, my father could very well have had some of those himself. In 1983, they acquired the Swedish game manufacturer Alga. I don't know who that is, but nonetheless. Alga subsidiary was one of 5 companies who at one time produced the physical skill game Crossbows and Catapults. Nice. Yep. Since 1958, so yeah. Okay. Thank you, Ko-Fi. We do have a Ko-Fi, so those of you who are interested, N-Simplex Productions is the account name there. That is going to be my LLC, whatever, when I someday actually make one. Sorry. Okay. At the moment, it's very sad. There's not even a need to worry about creating an LLC because the tax people are like, get lost. You are not worth our time. Okay. So if these competencies are valuable, then we need to evaluate them, which again gets us that very short quip of a saying here: evaluate that which you value. That is going to be pretty much the mantra of the rest of the book. The rest of the chapters being evaluation, assessment, etc. Forming grades and all that. Okay. So how we evaluate them becomes a key question, also because evaluation is a double-edged sword. When we evaluate our students, they also evaluate us. For what we choose to evaluate tells our students what we value. So if we value perseverance, we need to find a way to evaluate it such that the students will see it. Right, so they will notice that which you actually value and act accordingly. So if you don't actually value perseverance, they're not going to bother. They know that you don't care, so they're just going to be like, well, I'll just give up and like look up the answer. I'll go on to ChatGPT and ask it to find the answer for me. Those of you who have been over to Dr. Gold's at Actual Education, you know how he uses ChatGPT, right? He uses it for finding the answer to like see if it, I mean, just to see whether it even knows what to do with said question. But he also does it to just get an answer, and then we do our work to evaluate that answer. Hey, Dr. Gold's on. Well, what do you know? I didn't even notice. I think I was doing Tai Chi when the notification came up, so. That song again. So if we value perseverance, we need to find a way to evaluate it. If we value collaboration, we need to find a way to evaluate it. No amount of talking about how important something is and valuable these competencies are is going to convince students about that conviction that we have, unless we evaluate. Yeah. Sorry. No amount of talking about how much we value these other abilities, like again perseverance, and the ability to work together, collaborate with other people, the willingness to take risks and all that. No amount of just talking about it and saying this is a really important thing is going to convince any students that we actually care about those particular things, unless we then evaluate it, especially if the only thing we evaluate is completing closed skill math questions. Right? It seems most teachers agree without meaning to. They don't actually want to value closed skill math questions. They want to be able to value a lot of other things. And, you know, those things that we had up there especially. But they're not actually showing that. And so the students don't believe them. Naturally. We need to put our evaluation where our mouth is. This is not to say that we stop evaluating students' abilities to demonstrate individual attainment of curriculum outcomes, but we need to also find ways to evaluate those things that we actually say we find most valuable. If you have been implementing the 11 practices presented thus far, you are probably starting to feel this tension, the feeling that somehow we need to broaden our assessment practice to begin to value the competencies that we are espousing, developing, and utilizing every day in a thinking classroom. But to do this, this need in and of itself only tells us what we want to do. It doesn't tell us how to do it, and how we do it turns out, like everything else we've talked about in this book, to actually be important. Okay, so how do we do it? Right, the tension was the exact starting point.
Children used to run and play. Look at all the mess we made. Guess I never know where it went wrong. Sometimes I feel like all that's sad, 'cause we're old and people forget. In this crazy world I don't belong. I see fire burning, but I close my eyes.
Right, the need to evaluate the skills versus the need to evaluate what we actually value is that tension, this starting point that we need to get from. And so doing this research, Peter begins to find ways to value perseverance, collaboration, and willingness to take risks that we were asking students to undertake. Clearly, your typical test is not going to provide the means to achieve this. We needed other tools, other metrics, other instruments that could evaluate complex competencies. One thought was to try to leverage a tool that already existed, do we leverage the rubric in order to see if it could help? You may be familiar with or have used rubrics or matrices, as they're sometimes called, I guess probably in Canada or other places in the US, because it was never called a matrix anywhere that I was. The rubric, although not designed to evaluate competencies we were interested in, was widely used within the jurisdiction where the research was taking place and was familiar to both teachers and students. As such, it became a starting point into our research into the use of rubrics. And like our research into homework in Chapter 7, the student notes in Chapter 11, our research into rubrics began with a deep dive into how effective the status quo is. And it turns out, not very. Is anyone surprised? Now, I had a boss who was like, who had specialized in her doctorate, I think, in like developing rubrics. And so at some point we had developed what we thought was a rubric, and she was like, that's not a rubric. That is a, like, I don't even know what she called it. It was like, that is not a rubric. That is a, like, table of objectives or something like that. And we're like, so what's the difference? And there was a long chat about, oh my, no, you definitely do not understand the difference between rubric and the other stuff we're trying to create. Okay. Huh. Interesting. Okay. Let me copy these to my picture. Really? Yeah, you should quit. Oh man. Okay. So we need to go into math, building, thinking, classrooms. There we go. I can't paste. Okay, there we go. And then we need to back this out to downloads. BTC chapter 11. Also put that in here. Cool. Oh, gross. How would you go and do that? Okay. So, status quo, they're not effective at all. Again, not surprising. You have a love-hate relationship with rubrics. Next question, Zach. Is it actually rubrics? Or are they not rubrics? Oh, yeah. This right here, my daughter is horrified that I have written in my book. I mean, it's like all over. Tend to be too specific. Yes. Okay. Well, I mean, you've read this book. You know where this is headed. Okay. So here's the status quo. The typical existing 4-column rubric from British Columbia Ministry of Education 2020. You're on the hate side? Oh no. Rubrics Cube? Well, here, Dr. L, I'll give you one. This is the square one. Which means that when you turn it around 180 degrees, it's now a pentagon. Nope, hexagon. And then we could do all sorts of messed up other stuff with it, but tend to use guidelines, yeah. This one's really fascinating because it has some interesting algorithms that go with it. I still do not actually know the algorithms for the standard Rubik's Cube, but I started specializing in the square one ones, and I was like, hey, check this out. Okay, so this is your standard rubric. Across the top we have the aspect, not yet within expectations, meets expectations to a minimum level, fully meets expectations, and exceeds expectations. The snapshot, student is unable to meet basic requirements without the of the task without close ongoing assistance, unable to provide relevant extension. Minimal. The work satisfies the most basic requirements of the task but is flawed or incomplete in some way, may produce a simple extension with help. Fully meets. The work satisfies basic requirements. If asked, the student can produce a relevant extension or further illustration. Exceeds expectations. The work is complete, accurate, and efficient. The student may volunteer an extension, an application, or a further illustration. And then we have going down, concepts and applications, so recognizing mathematics, grade-specific concepts and skills, patterns and relationships. Strategies and approaches include procedures and estimates to verify solutions. Accuracy is the recording and the calculations. Representation and communication is presenting work, constructing, charts, diagrams, displays, etc., and explaining the procedures and results. So, naturally, we have all of these levels here. There are, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 20. Well, okay, 16, because it's just these 4. Alright, so we have a block of 16 things. Each student is evaluated on each of the 4 categories within each of the 4 aspects. So we go across and every student has like a circle over one of these things, and then I have a pen. You know, a student is going to see like they have that would not happen. But a student would have something like this, a grade for each of their individual levels, and probably some notes over on the side which explained why the student got each of those individual grades. So, again, typical. Sorry, we'll leave it there for a minute. Cursory observations in the classroom when rubrics like this one were in use revealed that students, when they received their feedback on a particular assessment, 75% of them, he says this is in one particular lesson, 75% of the students in that lesson spent less than 10 seconds looking at the rubric when it was returned to them. That included all of the comments that were attached to it. The rest of the students spent less than 1 minute looking at the rubric and looking at the feedback. Irrespective of how much time was spent grading student work, and irrespective of how carefully teachers highlighted comments on the rubric to match what they were seeing in the student work, most students weren't even looking at it, never mind attending to the feedback. The messages were being delivered, but were not being received. Therefore, the rubrics were having basically no impact on student behavior. We wanted rubrics that had impact. Otherwise, what are you doing? So we began a process of successive designing, modifying, and testing various kinds of rubrics. Our goal was simple: find a rubric that could be used to increase thinking behaviors, such as perseverance, collaboration, and willingness to take risks. What emerged from this research was a rubric that looked very different to this one. So, the next rubric that was designed for it looked something like this. Let me crop that, so we don't need to... So yeah, this is what we got. So Peter and team developed this rubric. So what is it? I'll give you a second. Okay, first, the focus. Whereas the initial rubrics up there looked for competencies in student work, the new rubric right there is looking for competencies in student actions. Right, so we want to evaluate actions, not the finished product by itself. Because again, if you're just worried about the physical finished product, students will find a way around doing the proper actions. So this is what is called an observational rubric. There was a paper in 2015 by Elrod and Strayer. Not the Strayer. Using an observational rubric to facilitate change in undergraduate classroom norms. Annual perspectives in mathematics education, assessment to enhance teaching and learning, NCTM. 2015 said. Yeah. That is, it is an observational rubric to be used by the teacher while students are thinking, not after they're done thinking. So, again, evaluate actions, sure, but it also is during the activities. This, as it turned out, gave us much more direct access to student competencies and, in return, produced bigger changes in student behaviors. Okay, number 2 is number of aspect columns. So what the Ministry for Education from Canada or British Columbia said all the way at the top, right? The number of aspects that we have there went from does not meet expectations all the way through exceeds expectations. Here, on the other hand, in this collaboration rubric, what do we see? Well, there are 3. There's the stuff on this end, which is behaviors, or rather actions, that we do not want to see, closed to others' ideas, disrespectful of others, actively excluding other people, hogging the marker, and being discouraging. And then what do you have on this far end? This far end says, open to others' ideas, respectful of others, actively inclusive of other people, sharing the marker, and being encouraging. That's about it. Right? And then what's the center? It's empty. So most of the existing rubrics, as all the way at the top there, initially looked at... Each of the existing rubrics we initially looked at consisted of at least 4 columns, and in some cases as many as 5 or 6. The problem is that we cannot nuance our language well enough to communicate differences among that many columns. The bigger problem is that we think we can.
KLM Royal Dutch Airlines. If distance were no object, what would you do?
I'd be in Rome, submerged in flour, learning to make real pizza from a nonna who means business.
Rio for us. We'll take a samba class and samba on down to Pedro de Sal.
Travel far from where you are. Fly from Leeds Bradford Airport via Amsterdam with KLM Royal Dutch Airlines. Visit klm.co.uk.
Okay. Cannot develop nuanced enough language to gradate our rubrics enough for 5 to 6 columns or more. And again, but we think we can. We have an overinflated sense of self and sense of our abilities in order to do this. So what do we do instead? Our attempts to differentiate student work across 4 columns. It's easy to create language for the first column. This generally describes poor work, and that's really easy to articulate. Likewise, the good work, represented in the 4th column, is super easy to explain. It's when we try to differentiate between the 2 columns in the middle that we start getting into trouble and end up trying to say, like mostly right versus partially right versus primarily or usually or sometimes or occasionally. Even if we believe it's clear, it is not clear to the students. What's worse is that we discovered that information in rubrics like the one up above at the top was ambiguous to teachers as well. In many cases, where we ended up secretly scrambling a rubric, the teachers were unable to correctly unscramble it. Sometimes even scrambling it more than it was in the first place. Turns out that the level of nuance was often just as difficult for them to manage and interpret as it was for the students. They didn't have a better model to follow. So, once we figured this out, we moved to a 3-column rubric, and all of those problems went away. The rubrics became easier to use and create, the students found them easier to interpret, and they spent more time looking at the feedback, and they were able to take action on that feedback. This was true for students in grades 2 through 12. For K and 1, however, we found that 3 columns initially was even too much. Students in these grades are still developing their ability to understand nuance and subtlety, and they're still experiencing their world through the lens of binary opposites, good and bad, hot and cold, low and high, wet and dry, big and little, and so on. Therefore, for these grades, the rubrics were only 2 columns and were constructed, for the most part, in using visuals, or by using visuals. So this is K and 1. Right, binary opposites. Right, and this leads into the third aspect, or let's not reuse that word. This leads into the third difference between these two, which is the headings. The heading is replaced entirely. So instead of having your aspect stuff, instead of explaining what each of those columns represent, you just put an arrow leading toward the side you want them to move toward. You can see in the K1 right here, we start with a very small arrow that leads to a big arrowhead, right? Stuff we want to have less, stuff we want to have more. Make it obvious. And the one that's, 2 through 12, this one's actually just a flat arrow. My book was curving while I was trying to take the picture, but nonetheless, right? The arrowhead is the same width, or sorry, the arrow shaft, the line going across, is the same thickness all the way throughout. So it's just that the arrowhead is leading us in this direction to say, hey, all of you, go this way. Right, leads the students toward the intended direction. Everybody head that way. Now, originally, right, in the original rubric, in the original rubric, students saw how they are rather than where they are. Boy. So this is something that's important. 2016, Dweck wrote a paper on the fixed versus growth mindset. So, I mean, pretty much everybody's heard of fixed versus growth mindset. The original rubric, the students saw themselves in these, as these things. So they said, oh, I do not meet expectations. Right? Not yet within expectations. Okay, that means I am not meeting expectations here. They're not seeing it as, but I could improve. They're seeing it as, this is me. This is where I belong. So understanding the concept of growth mindset becomes much more important for these students, and then they can eventually build up toward something. So again, get them to think not about this fixed mindset, but rather the growth mindset. That, yeah, sure, you're here now, but you can be better later. You're working toward this other thing.
Just drink it. Why is it frozen? Why? It's for 40 degrees below. Or did you think we were standing here?
Right, so growth mindset indicates
Wings, but only if you drink it.
you are here, but moving toward the optimal result. Right? Think of it as growth. You're moving in this direction. So if you can get the students to buy into that, then having this idea of the growth mindset indicates that, yeah, sure, you're here now, but you won't be forever. This is not you. This is not your identity. You are heading in this particular direction. So all that was required really was, again, replacing the heading with an arrow. You're moving that way. Number 4, reduction in language. Right, the fourth visible column, the fourth visible difference is the reduction in the language between these two rubrics. So we have the first and the third column in the new rubric are just a series of bullet points. It's not a full sentence minus punctuation and the capital at the beginning. Work is often confusing with key information omitted under the does not meet expectations all the way at the bottom there for representation and communication, right? Work is often confusing with key information omitted. You don't need to say all that. Right? Key information omitted is even too long. If you can help it, shred it down even smaller than that. So what we have in this other one, right? Discouraging. You are exhibiting discouraging behaviors to other people. We don't want you here. We want you moving that way so that you are becoming encouraging. Right? And I would say that there is a clear goal in mind. Right? Goals for growth. Move in this particular direction. Use these things as your shining beacon out in the distance that you want to become more encouraging. Whatever it takes, right? Figure it out. Okay, when we were working with 3-column rubrics with language in each column, the students treated each column as a discrete level of competency being evaluated. So when they were asked to evaluate their group's competency, they highlighted their performance as fitting one of the 3 columns. All right, ads are about to start. This is how they had been evaluated in the 4-column rubric, so it makes sense that they would do the same on the 3-column rubric. When they removed the language in the middle, however, their self-evaluating completely changed. The students no longer thought of the rubric as a collection of discrete levels, but rather as one continuum. All right. We'll let that go there. Be back in 3. Righto. Thank you, everybody, for sticking around. Me. Just popped another stitch on this thing. Might have to sew it again. Right, so Peter decided to eliminate the language from the middle column, and suddenly it was not discrete columns, but rather a continuum going from this side to that side. And now the students were able to figure out where their behavior, where their actions belonged on that one day. And then on the next day, they could self-evaluate and figure out where their behavior belonged for that day. And they could see it as, again, growth. We're trying to move toward this particular good direction, the thing that we're trying to do. Even students who had previously used 3-column rubrics for self-evaluation almost seamlessly switched almost instantaneously to using this as a continuum rather than discrete structures. So we have here, oops, not that one, that one. Right, this is how they were working on it. Again, almost immediately. Oh, come on now. Boo. There we go. Right, discrete, continuous. Right, and then the number 5, the last thing that we were looking at there, was the reduction in number of competencies. Assessed. So you can see here, right, we do have only 4 technical competencies. However, then we're also breaking each of those down into multiple parts. I suppose you could say, well, you're doing the same thing down here with this one as well. This is all collaboration, then we could break it into 5 parts. Okay. So, one can argue. You may have not only noticed there was a reduction in the language in general, but also a reduction in the number of competencies being assessed in a single rubric, whereas the 4-column rubrics like we see here, we're trying to evaluate 4 or even 5 competencies at a time. The rubrics in the previous figures evaluate only 1, collaboration. And it does so using indicators that are more straightforward and approachable for students. This is because of how this rubric was created and used. evaluate only one competency at a time really is a goal. So you don't have to evaluate every single competency every single day. That would be insane. So instead, what we do here is we spread it all out. We say, okay, pretty much every day, you're going to be evaluating something. That's not even true. Like, once a week, go evaluate something. Figure out what it is that you need to evaluate first, and then evaluate it. So, determining what you need to evaluate is also going to be covered in this next section. Most of the rubrics we initially looked at were created by teachers, teaching organizations, publishers, ministries, departments of education, etc. The rubrics up above were created with and by the students, by those who were... Yep. Were created with and by the students who were going to be evaluated by those particular rubrics. This is not a new idea. The practice of having students concoct success criteria, co-construct, not concoct. The idea of having students co-construct success criteria, scoring guides, and rubrics has been around for a long time. Davies and Herbst did it did a paper in 2013, and Staples did a paper in 2007, not the company. The purpose of co-constructing a rubric is that the ownership happens to be when the students see they have... The purpose of co-constructing a rubric is the ownership that happens when students see they have a voice in what will be evaluated and how it will be evaluated. Co-construction of rubrics allows for the emergence of language and terminology that, although unique and potentially idiosyncratic, is clear to the students who had a hand in creating it. That does not mean that we can't look at other instruments for inspiration and guidance, but we need to go through the process of co-construction with our students. Okay, so co-construction.
Travel far from where you are. Flying from Leeds Bradford Airport with KLM Royal Dutch Airlines. If this is an object, what would you do?
We'd go back to Hong Kong to watch my honeymoon.
Dim sum for breakfast.
Our research on using rubrics in thinking classrooms confirmed this over and over and over again.
Travel far from
In the thinking classroom setting, the way this looks is amazingly streamlined and time efficient, and it begins at the end of a lesson where you see a competency lacking.
That's showbiz, baby. The debut album from
Ugh. This is killing me.
by Jade.
Alright, seriously, Spotify.
Listen on Spotify now.
This is going to get me flagged over and over and over again. I mean, all I have to do is just erase the song, but it's still just, it shows up. Like, you know, I get a little tiny warning that just says, yeah, there's a song in there, so you probably won't be able to monetize this. Not that I'm going to monetize it anyway, but... They do have a good app, though. If you basically just go in and say, like, okay, fine, clean it, it will erase the song and the song only. You could just take out the whole clip and say, like, okay, the song and all audio during this entire section is just gone. But that could potentially mean that something I say is missing. So instead, I try to just specifically erase the song. And they have some sort of neural network that goes through and does that. It's pretty good. Okay, end of a lesson in which you see a competency lacking. All right, request request creation of criteria. So here's a script. There were some really interesting answers emerging from your group work today, but I noticed that a lot of you were giving up quite easily. You didn't quite have very good perseverance. So what I would like to know is, what does good perseverance look like? Teacher draws a T-chart on the board and says good on the right-hand side. Student, not giving up when it gets tough. Teacher writes this under the good heading. Looking around when you get stuck. Okay, looking for what? A hint. Looking around for a hint when you're stuck. Writes that on the board. Asking the teacher for help. Teacher writes on the board. Okay, so what does bad perseverance look like? Write in bad column. Giving up right away. Right away. Okay, just giving up. When? As soon as we get stuck or it gets hard. Teacher writes, as soon as it... just like shuts off immediately. It's really annoying. What's interesting about this process is that no matter how lacking a class may be in demonstrating an observable competency, they can always generate a list of indicators of what it would look like to have that competency, and also, therefore, what it would look like to not have that competency, or what you would expect. Yeah, just not having that. That's fine. In the hundreds of times this has been tried, this has always been true. Even if the students don't exhibit the desired behavior, they at least know what that behavior looks like. So before the next class, the indicators in this T-chart are then used by the teacher to build a rubric like the one we see just up here. And depending on the grade, we can either keep the exact language that the students use or start tweaking it just a little bit to fit a little bit better, to clean up the grammar or whatever else. Right? We don't necessarily collect every single indicator that they suggested, but, or that we keep the order the same. However, what we do take, we take verbatim of what is in the T-chart as much as we can. As you see in the script, our chance to massage the verbiage occurs as, there we go, as we fill out the chart, not when we go home and make the rubric. Students need to see as much as possible that it is their ideas and their language that have been contributed to the formation of this chart. Of the rubric, sorry.
dream too much. I tell myself.
So change the language when you're making the chart. Try to suggest maybe a couple of things. Ask, again, do Socratic method, right? Ask a few questions that lead them down the path to where you want them to go. But do not change their language once you have left the class, once they have left the classroom. Keep identical wording as to what they created in class. Right? It's all about ownership. This can be heightened if, during the next class, they also see the new rubric and the original T-chart at the exact same time. You can leave it on the board, if able. Otherwise, you show them a picture of the T-chart when you present them with the rubric that they had a hand in co-creating. So, show rubric and chart. At the beginning of next class.
I dream too much. I tell myself.
When evaluation will occur. Right, so they get to see that, and they get to say, hey, we made that last class. That's really cool that we're using our stuff. Okay. As the rubric will, in essence, be a series of indicators, each of which is on a continuum, it's also important to select language from the T-chart that is dichotomous in nature. So, each of the good indicators on the right is paired with an opposite bad indicator on the left, open to each other's ideas, closed to each other's ideas, etc. Students are not necessarily thinking about this when they're offering suggestions as to what goes on the chart, so you may need to suggest that they think about what is the opposite of each of these things. So each of these things in the good column, what is opposite of that in the bad column? All the things in the bad column, what's the opposite that we could do in the good column? This is not to say that each suggestion will always have a natural opposite. What is important is that the indicators that make it into the final rubric are dichotomous. How you present the rubric and how you use it turned out to be just as important as how it was created. Pretty much no surprise here. Yet again. Okay, presentation of and usage of rubric. As important as the method of creation. Okay. For grades 4 through 12, we found it worked best if we could do something like this. So, yesterday you helped me create this T-chart. After school, I took that chart and made it into a rubric. Project the rubric. You will see that one of these rubrics is taped up at each of your vertical surfaces. This is because today, while you're working at these boards, I will be evaluating 3 groups using this rubric. Why only 3 groups? The answer is simple. You only have time to do 3 groups. Keep in mind, you're still having to manage flow and prepare for consolidation. It's important that you do not compromise your role as a teacher in the thinking classroom just to be an evaluator. Okay. This is a thinking space. It needs your stewardship. So for younger grades, K through 3, we found that the introduction needed to be a bit different. So yesterday, you helped me create this T-chart. After school, I took the chart home and made it into a rubric. Well, not necessarily home, but I took that chart and made it into a rubric, project. Let's go over it together so you all understand what each part means. You'll see that one of these rubrics is taped up at each of the vertical surfaces, etc., etc. While you're working at these boards, I expect all of you to behave like students in these pictures, pointing out the right-hand column of the dichotomous good versus bad stuff. Regardless, the perseverance in the room that day will be through the roof. And not because the specter of evaluation is there, but because the co-constructed rubric makes it clear to every student and every group what is expected of them in that particular day. The fact that you're evaluating 3 groups is only necessary to show that you are truly evaluating what you value. At the end of the time spent at the boards, you can give every group a highlighter and ask them to self-evaluate how well their group persevered on that day. When they're done, give the 3 groups that you are evaluating the rubrics you highlighted for them. The total time you'll have spent on co-creating, presenting, and using this rubric will be less than 15 minutes. But the transformational changes in the students will be monumental. So, have all the groups self-evaluate. Give yours to the 3 groups. To compare, contrast, read the feedback. Every time we've done this, the changes in the student behavior around whatever competency we chose to focus on, irrespective of how poor it was the day before, is huge. Once students see that behaviors are expected and that these behaviors are valued, the students begin to see them as valuable as well. And when these competencies improve, so does your thinking classroom. Okay. So we move on to the FAQ portion. If anybody has any questions, let me know. Should we be recording how each group did? If not, why would the students care, and how would they be able to see that we do in fact value it? This is a good question, and it is something that we wondered as well. We're so used to using grades as the carrot or stick, depending on the student, that we use to motivate student behavior. What we learned from the research on rubrics is that students see that we value something if we're willing to spend grades on it, or if we're willing to spend time on it. They know that time is limited, and as such, it is valuable. And if you're willing to give some of it up to focus on their perseverance or collaboration or risk-taking or whatever it is you want to focus on, then it must be valuable. This is not to say that you can't record their performance in some way. What is important, however, is that you do not let them see how you do it. Our research clearly showed that if you put a number or a letter on a rubric, then the students ignore all the other aspects of the feedback and that the rubric affords. Race in 2010, as well as others, have observed the same phenomenon across a variety of settings. Numbers and letters go in your gradebook, not on the rubric. Some people might have been wondering, what do you do with that fourth card? Right? You took 3 cards out of each rank, and you got them to the students. The students have, at some point, returned those cards, so that they don't keep them. Never happens. No, never. Students will return those cards, and you put them into a pile. Hopefully they've been, given a once-over with your alcohol wipes in the room. What do you do with the 4th card? Make a pile of those 4th cards. Shuffle them up. Pick 3 of them. Those are your randomly evaluated groups. It's a fair way to do it. It makes sure that it is, maximally fair. You're not always picking on one student or something like that. And the students do not need to know at any point who is being evaluated until they are done with their self-evaluation and you hand back those evaluations that you did to those 3 groups. If it's true that the students see something as valuable if we spend time on it, why do we even have to bother saying we're going to evaluate 3 groups? What we've learned with students in grades 4 through 12, they are so often used to a value. Nope. Students in those grades are often so used to value being projected through the collection of grades that they themselves don't know any other way to gauge value. This is more prevalent in high school students, but we saw it to some degree in students as young as grade 4. When you state that you are evaluating 3 groups, they see that you are valuing those groups' behavior through grades. When they self-evaluate their performance and see how valuable this feedback is, then they begin to see that there is value inherent in the process and the time you spent on it. So, after 2 or 3 uses of rubrics in your classroom, you can drop the pretense of evaluating 3 groups and pretty much just go with self-evaluation. You can use those as student grades. You could, in fact, give grades to every single group based on their self-evaluation, and you would probably have to keep this kind of quiet or make an aggregate grade. If you have an affect score, you could just make a big spreadsheet, and then every time you evaluate any particular student, you just input that particular day's score in. They don't necessarily have to know each individual one. How often should we be co-creating and using rubrics? You co-create a rubric whenever there is a behavior that you would like to improve within the classroom. Once you co-create it, you can use it right away, and for 2 or 3 lessons in a row, show that you value it. Then you can take a break from it for a while and only use it every once in a while. Or if you see that it's needed again. If it's later on in the semester and they're really good at it, you can even throw it out and just be like, hey guys, let's evaluate this particular thing tomorrow. Just 'cause. Let's see how you're doing now. And when everybody scores top marks or maybe a little bit under, oh, we did 80%, something like that. You'd be like, great, now look at where you came from. You were all down here before at 20%. And now you've moved your way up to 80. isn't that wonderful how you've moved your grade, or moved, not grade, how you've moved that behavior, changed your actions, decided that you were going to do something, and then followed through with it. Then, again, you can now say, oh, look, you all just got a really good grade because you made improvement. Where am I? Co-create, right. For example, if you see a particular group not persevering, grab a perseverance rubric and tape it up on their vertical surface. This will signal to the group that you are not impressed with their current behavior, and you will be watching them from now on. While at the same time communicating exactly what it is that you will be watching for. And every once in a while, you'll see a group member pulling out an old rubric from their notebook or from their backpack or whatever for their group, because that individual or that group as a whole is aware that they aren't behaving as they probably should. Self-policing is wonderful. You mentioned that these new rubrics should only evaluate one competency at a time, but you didn't specify how many indicators the rubric should look for. In the example you gave, that was the other one. What's this? Collaboration, right? There were 5 indicators on the one rubric. And then the example in the T-chart looks like it can end up with many more. So we had this T-chart down here. Nope. Did I not do it? Okay, cool. Looks like we could have many more. Is there an optimal number of indicators that a rubric should have? Answer was, yeah, there we go. The T-chart here has, what, 4? No, only 3. Only 3, but the person asking the teacher asking the question is hinting that there could be many, many more. So students could come up with 10 indicators or 20 indicators of, like, this is what we're doing bad today. We found that 5 was the maximum you should have at any one time. Beyond that, the rubric either starts to become redundant or starts losing focus. It's true that the T-chart will eventually have many more than 5 indicators. This means that you're going to have to be selective as you choose which are the most important to include in the rubric at that particular time. Pick the ones that are most on point for the moment and also most clear for the students. Is it really true that K1 students are not ready to see these rubrics as a continuum and only see their behavior as fitting one column or the other? Yes and no. From a developmental perspective, nuance and subtlety are just beginning to emerge within this age group, but how fast it develops depends a lot on what kinds of educational experiences and how much exposure to the 2-column rubrics they've had. We saw grade 1 students who, by the end of the school year, were starting to use the rubric as a continuum. You talked about these co-constructed rubrics as observational, to be used only for evaluating students' visible in-the-moment behaviors. Can I also use them to evaluate students' producibles, the things that they hand in? Yes, but the process of creating them is slightly different. One of the things that we learned from research is that, regardless of how poor a class might be around an observable competency such as perseverance or collaboration, they can always tell us what it looks like to be good at it. The same is not true for competencies that are evaluated through producibles. For example, if we gather students at the board and ask them to tell us what a good problem-solving solution looks like, or a good proof, they cannot tell us. At least not with the same level of confidence as when we ask about some sort of observational behavior. You need to begin this process by having them look at exemplars. So you give each group the same 3 examples of, for example, a good problem-solving solution. One of these examples is, for example, problem-solving solutions. One of these examples is very poor, one is very good, and one is in the middle. Ask them as a group to put these in order from worst to best, and then discuss them amongst themselves what it is that makes them the good and the poor. Then, when you gather the students at the board and co-construct the T-chart, they have things in mind that they can offer. A small nuance that is important when discussing exemplars is to, as much as possible, make the middle exemplar the longest exemplar. This will push students to discuss quality over quantity. Okay. Competencies and producibles aside, how is this going to help me evaluate my students' attainment of content? It doesn't. This chapter and the rubrics discussed here are an answer to the question of how we show through evaluation that we value competencies like collaboration, perseverance, risk-taking, and so on. This is not to say these rubrics cannot be adapted to evaluate attainment of content. We just didn't pursue it. Having said that, the next chapter, 13, looks at how we can help students self-assess what they're doing with the attainment of content. And chapter 14, after that, looks at how we can grade students on their attainment of content, while at the same time increasing student thinking and engagement. You talk about these rubrics as evaluations. Shouldn't they be called assessments? In the assessment and evaluation literature, assessment is often defined as being formative, and evaluation is defined as being summative. You will see that in the next 2 chapters that this dichotomy eventually collapses in on itself. All assessment and evaluation should be formative. Some of it is also summative. Likewise, I do not find the distinction between assessment and evaluation of, for, or as learning to be of much help. All assessment and evaluation should be for learning. Some of it will be of learning. All assessment and evaluation should be as learning, as it was in this chapter with the co-construction of the rubric. Taken together, I do not distinguish between assessment and evaluation, and I use the terms interchangeably. In this chapter, I use evaluation because of its close connection to values and the prompting question around what it is we value in our students. Okay. Cool. So we're going to take this. We're going to come this way. Huh. Right, so the macro move is going to be evaluate what you value. And the micro moves. We're going to co-construct. Oops. Do not co-construct the rubrics. Co-construct the T-charts. with students. Turn charts. Into either 2 or 3 column rubrics. Again, depending on your grade level. So if you're doing college stuff, if you're doing high school, middle school, and most of elementary school, it could be 3 column rubrics. Again, what's bad, what's good, middle. Leave the middle blank. All right, assess 1 competency. At a time. Give some time between each of the competency evaluations, and that also means that you could like cycle through a couple of them. If you were saying, okay, today we're going to look at this, tomorrow, or don't even tell them, but you know, the next day work on the other one, the next day flip back to the first one, the next day flip back to the second one, if you're doing 2 at once. If you only have 1 competency that you are currently working on, awesome. Just do it right, multiple days right in a row. All right, assess 1 competency at a time. Use an arrow instead of label headings. Okay, keep language to a minimum. Preserve student voice. Again, increase their ownership over those rubrics. Have no more than 5 indicators. Right? Use exemplars when creating these producible charts. So if you're saying like, okay, I need you to figure out what's a good or bad proof of something, then again, you want to give them exemplars of what's good, what's bad, and what's in the middle. And again, what's in the middle should be the longest one. So it should over-expound on what it's trying to do. Boy. What are some of the things in this chapter that immediately feel correct? So, anybody can answer these, by the way. For me, I think generally the discussion of rubrics being overpacked with all sorts of stuff certainly is something that resonated immediately. Evaluate what you value is a nice idea. I would always want to do that. I think my problem is that in some of the previous years, I would have looked at this and said, my goodness, how am I going to do it? Especially since A, I've got all this other stuff that I'm trying to do in the classroom at the same time, and also I have other stuff to grade. But that's the thing, is that you only have to do this in the classroom.
Once upon a time, charging your EV was a bit of a faff. Searching for a charger here, a tariff there, all while juggling life's daily dramas.
Okay. If you have previously used a rubric that has more than 3 columns, take a good look at it. And if you see language that is ambiguous and not helpful for moving students from one and see if you have language that is ambiguous and not helpful for moving students from one column to the next. If that rubric were scrambled, could you unscramble it? I think most of the time I could, but I was always using words like, does not meet expectations, sometimes, rarely, maybe down there, and then like typically, and then always. Or nearly always, because you can't always do something. It doesn't always... it's pretty much no way to do it. I had words that I knew what order they went in. Would I be able to unscramble it? Yes. Would my colleagues be able to unscramble it? Maybe. Think about some competencies that you feel your students need to improve on. Which of these do you think you should construct into a rubric for first? That's another question, right? So where would I go with it first with my students? As it was, most of the students in like the pre-calculus stuff probably would have been perseverance. I didn't have too many problems with ability to collaborate. My students mostly just did whatever they needed to. Mostly they would work together with other students without a hitch, without any questions asked or any pushback. There were certain students in certain classes that were just overtly annoying or who might have been kind of like, oh, I'm only in this because, I needed the college credit for it, but I already know what I'm doing. That was not actually that annoying to me. That was mostly like, the students who were like, I already know this material, so I'm just going to do all the work. I might have to curb the ability to collaborate for them. And say like, okay, look, the way that you can help your group the most is by not just doing the work. That you should work together with your group to see if you can like help lead them maybe, but not just going through and saying, I know how to do this, let's do it this way. In this chapter, I mentioned that it's easiest to co-construct a rubric right after an experience in which the class was deficient in the particular competency you want to focus on. With this in mind, think of some experiences that you can manufacture that will accentuate the deficiency you might want to address first. For example, if you want to focus on perseverance, you could begin by giving them a task that is tempting to give up on. Oh, I love it. but is solvable with time and effort. So one example for that could be, for example, solving the quadratic equation, coming up with the quadratic formula, coming from the initial place where we started, which is the y equal, no, well, 0, right? 0 equals a times the quantity x minus c parentheses squared plus d. Starting from here, find the quadratic form. No, don't do c and d. H and k. That matters. Right, and then relate this to ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Right, so how could we find the quadratic formula starting from this? Let that be a challenge to anybody who hasn't done it yet. In the FAQ, I mentioned it was possible to co-construct rubrics for producibles. What kind of producibles do you use that you would like your students to get better at? And what would the exemplars look like? I don't have any particular examples for this, but sometimes there are proofs, right? We could talk about the quadratic formula and trying to prove it, and things like that. There's a lot of stuff we could do. An example could be like an example of like a long project could be, here was how I would find out what the height of this building is using trigonometry. Right, so we could go through and talk about how to create a using a protractor. How do we create a inclinometer? Right, it's just holding a protractor, lining your eye up with the top of the building, and then having a plumb weight on a string or whatever hanging down. What does that do? Oh, it tells us where the angle is. Turns out it's complementary because that's the other angle. You find the complementary angle, and then you subtract it from 90 and find its actual angle, the angle of inclination. So we could go through like a whole series of things to do for that sort of reproducible or producible. What are some of the challenges you'll anticipate in a experience in implementing the strategies in this chapter? I think my problem is like just coming up with the particular thing that we wanted to work on during any particular day. Like, what is it that we need to work on? I was too busy doing 50 other things. I didn't really notice that there was a specific problem. Maybe some students would be able to, at the end of class, just be like, hey, so what did you all see out in the class? Was there a particular issue that arose at any particular group? Don't use names or anything like that. Don't even point out which group had the problem. So like, hey, well, I heard from this other group that. This was happening. Be very vague about it. The following tasks have been selected because they require a lot of perseverance on the part of the students, and therefore would be a perfect precursor to co-constructing a perseverance rubric. Grades K through 3. If I were to write the numbers from 1 to 100, how many times would I use the digit 7? What if I wrote the numbers 1 to 1,000? How many times would I use the digit 0? Grades 4 through 9. A country road is 27 miles long and goes all the way around a lake, connecting 6 cottages that are all next to the lake. 2 of the cottages are 1 mile apart along the road. 2 cottages are 2 miles apart. 2 are 3 miles apart, and 2 are 4 miles apart. They're all the way to 2 are 25 miles apart, and 2 are 26 miles apart. How are the cottages distributed along the road? So, 6 cottages. And again, all of the different possible combinations are all these 2 cottages, or 2 of these cottages are this many miles apart. Grades 10 through 12. Pirate Diamond. A band of 9 pirates is going to disband. They've divided up all of their gold, but there remains 1 giant diamond that cannot be divided. To decide who gets it, the captain puts all the pirates, including himself, into a circle. He points at one person to begin, and that person steps out of the circle, takes his gold, and leaves. The person on his left stays in the circle, but the next person steps out. This continues with every second pirate leaving, until there is only 1 left. To whom should the captain point if he wants to make sure that he gets to keep the diamond for himself? What if there were 10 pirates, or 11 pirates, or N pirates? This is an adaptation of what it was called the Josephus problem. Same kind of idea. Okay. And thus we end another lesson into Peter Liljedahl's Building Thinking Classrooms. Next week, we're going to be talking about how we use formative assessment in a thinking classroom. I hope you all will join me for that. We will try and get... yeah, I'll try and get the pictures for next class as well. Same as what I did here for this one. Make sure that we have all of the ones that are necessary, and at the very least have them on my phone, and so I can pull them up directly into Excalidraw. So, we're going to find somebody to raid. Dr. Gold's been on for 2 hours. Nerduino's on. Starship test flight number 11. Beach cleanup during TwitchCon. Cosmo Quest. Dr. Pamela Gay is in that one, as well as oftentimes Dr. Fraser Kane. Takes me a second. Astro Canuck for, again, Starship. Yeah, let's go see Astro Canuck. We haven't been over there in a little bit. So, we are going to head over there in just a few seconds. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. We'll be back tomorrow with game-type stuff and Wednesday for math-type stuff, and I hope to see you for at least one of those. Good luck out there, stay safe, and we'll see you soon. My name is Obi-Wan Pez. This is N Simplex Pachinko. Have a good night.